off my buddies. And welcome back to Masters of Modern. I'm your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-hosts, Ben Bateman, Michael Grothy, and...
Where's your Thor bunny?
Oh, it's over here.
You gotta complete the trifecta.
I got all three starters, don't you worry.
Alex doesn't get lonely in quarantine because his company owns an industrial-sized printer. Yeah. So he just prints out life-size cutouts of his friends.
Just hang out together every day, play some games. You'd be very surprised about the terrible plays you've been making in Magic, Ben. I mean, you tapped out as a blue player against someone playing a combo deck. I won. It was really sad for you.
I'm playing lots of things that cost 5 or more in my deck.
Yeah,
what am
your
I
deck
doing?
was all 5 drops. It was really weird.
How do you win doing that?
I don't know. So welcome to Masters of Modern. We are a podcast that talks about Modern and Magic and all things Magic related. Today we are talking about companions. The recent ban and restricted announcement made this last Monday changed the way they work, changed the rule on how they function, and then also is doing a kind of ban a bunch of cards in standard and historic, right? Were they banned or were they restricted? I know that's different.
There was 2 cards.
Suspended.
There was 2 cards banned in standard, and then those same 2 cards were suspended in historic.
Got it. All right. And then there's some controversy about what choices they made there, so we're going to talk about that as well. But mostly it's about companion. I mean, companions have done a lot. We've done multiple episodes there. If you go to the,
this is like the 4th episode in a row now, I think, of us talking about companions. It's been all the rage to have those conversations the last month or so.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been all the rage to play them as well. So that's what people are.
It's like
as they were previously templated, they were very, very good. Are they still? I don't know. You guys will have to stay tuned in the episode to find out.
And before you do that, make sure to follow and subscribe. Twitter and stuff is all around us, and you can see the follow subscribe button down there. Press it. Also, big thank you to our Patreon, especially the Nobles of House Modern. Pinky's up to you.
Yeah, we've been having actually the best time doing those hangouts. You guys hear about them every week, but Cam Albergini, Brandon S. Russell, and Andrew Kelso, every week we get to hang out with those guys and kind of chat about what's going on in their lives, obviously, but then also just their thoughts on the bannings, what we're going to talk about in the episode, which is always fun to get the outside perspective. So thank you to all you guys for making that happen. And if you guys are interested, check out our Patreon.
Yep. And so getting kind of into the main conversation of and really the question everyone has on their mind about this is, now that the rules have changed, will they see play? And the way the rules change now is basically, if you have a companion sideboard and your deck meets all the restrictions of a companion, you can spend 3 mana at sorcery speed to take a companion from the sideboard and put it into your hand. This happens not on the stack, so it's faster than the stack would normally be. And yeah.
But it's the same kind of thing, right? Where it's a sorcery speed thing that if you have priority, you can do. So it's the same. It's effectively the same thing as like playing a land. Like you can do it at that point, but you can't. You're not able to respond to anything with it, and like, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Yeah, the special action like flipping a morph.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly like that. It's faster than mana is, right? It's faster than tapping a land, kind of.
You can do it at sorcery speed, right? So it's not like fast per se, but your opponent cannot respond to it.
Yeah. So over the course of the last little while, in Eternal formats, I mean, all the way to the most powerful formats, companions have become somewhat ubiquitous. Obviously, the ability to play one as the 15th card in your sideboard, build your deck restrictions around it, and then take advantage of it to kind of start with 8 cards has been something that I think we all knew would be very good. But it's funny. It's like sometimes in Magic, when they come up with a new thing, we all scratch our heads and we go like, I wonder how good that's really going to be. And then, in some cases it's interesting. In some cases it's not particularly good. And in some cases like this one, where you say you start with an 8th card, it turned out to be 100% as good as everybody thought it was going to be. And there was basically zero hesitation in making it that good. So I guess they just had to change the rules.
Right. And it's interesting, right? Basically every deck now that plays with a companion gets a 3 mana card automatically that reads Tutor for Companion. And puts it into your hand. And is that going to be, is that going to be a detriment? Is it going to be good enough for a lot of the companions to see play? I personally think that And we'll see exactly where the power level is, but I think they got pretty close to what they wanted, which I believe was they didn't want to kill these cards. They wanted the companion mechanic to still work, but they wanted the questions that they were hoping you would ask. Is this deck building restriction worth it? Is it worth it to not have an extra sideboard card? Is this going to actually be as powerful in my deck as it would be than just playing better cards? Worth it? And to some extent, for some of the cards I think we're going to talk about, is it worth it just playing them in the main deck? Luros especially to me is a card that I think there's a lot of decks that might just main deck him and then eschew the whole sideboard companion option.
It's an interesting question you pose, right? Like, I mean, so I think we all can agree Wizards looked at this and I don't think they wanted companions to suck. I don't think they wanted to look at them and destroy them forever for everyone. So they wanted to do that, they would have just banned them, I think. Or they would have made them really, really, really bad. But I think they're still trying to toe the line and find a way for these cards to be relevant because they're brand new. People are opening them in packs. I mean, that's like something they want. They want people to get excited when they see these cards. And so I think that, there's a couple perspectives to look at. If you start from the one you just mentioned a second ago, Alex, which is the main deck inclusion of these cards, I mean, look, Mishra's Bauble is a card that has seen play in tons and tons and tons of decks in Modern. If you have Luris in your deck and you cast Luris at any point in the game, it's no different than casting Luris on turn 3 out of your sideboard. It's just a little bit less efficient. It's a little bit less on curve.
You draw one less card, right? Like if you cast Luris from your sideboard, you drew a card and you have Luris.
Yeah.
Now, if you cast Luris from your hand, you don't draw that card, but you still can draw a card off of Bauble. You can still get the value from having Luros in play, and you have the option, if he dies, to draw additional ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that Wizards cited in the ban announcement was that they felt companions provided repetitive gameplay because you could put it in your hand every time. So the question of a lot of solutions that were proposed to the companion mechanic when we knew that just changing the mechanic was on the table was like, well, what if you have to mulligan to 6 and then you get to put a companion in your hand, or like you take a forced mulligan to put in your hand, or like when you put in your hand you put a card on the bottom, or you can put 2 cards on the bottom to put in your hand at any time, or like stuff like that. But that still has the same repetitiveness problem, which is like every turn 3 your opponent has access to Luris, or every turn 5 they have access to Obosh, or every turn, not really 6, but every time they have 6 mana, they can immediately put a Gerudo into play or whatever. It still had that problem. So you'll still always have access to your companion if you're using it as your companion. The difference is that because you have to pay the 3 mana, you're playing it off curve. So it makes games less repetitive because you're not just jamming Luris on turn 3. You're waiting until you have time to spend 3 mana. Maybe it's turn 4 with the Fatal Push-Up or something, or maybe it's turn 5 when you play a 2-drop, since you obviously have a bunch in your deck, and then you put it in your hand. And then you play it the next turn. And so it's like you have to kind of react to the game state more to know when you can safely pay 3 mana. So it makes them less repetitive, even though you're still potentially going to see them every game.
So I think on that note, Michael, like when we talk about the difference between, losing a card versus not losing a card, it's very significant, right? Because if you're just comparing the mana cost, 3 mana tutors in Modern historically are not good. People don't really play Idyllic Tutor. Fabricate's not really a card that comes up. Whatever the Call the Planeswalker 3-drop white one that you can get is that gets you a Planeswalker. Those cards don't really see play historically. And even some of the clunkier 2 mana tutors that are a little more specific, like Time of Need, those don't really get played. To be effective in Modern, you need to be War of Invention, or you need to be, a Call the Ulvenwald, a Traverse the Ulvenwald. You need to be very, very efficient. So what it comes down to is the fact that you're getting the extra card is why that 3 mana becomes worthwhile to pay. And I think Modern is littered with examples of cards that are pretty good early, but if they have that late game function, they become insane. So the fact that you don't have to worry about these being early, you just get the late game function, is what makes them, I think, so appealing still.
Yeah, it's a hedge against mana flooding, right? Like I think that there are 3 types of decks I think playing companions before. There were the ones built around the companion as its like main engine. There were ones that were using companions as an additional piece of their strategy. And then that were built around those companions. And then the third one would be decks that just get the freebie, right? Like Burn was playing Obosh partly because it just didn't cost them anything. They weren't playing too many cards.
Burn. What? Right. Are you talking about Standard Burn playing Obosh?
Oh, sorry. I meant Standard's playing Luros. Sorry, Standard's playing Luros because it didn't cost them anything. They had mono cards under 2 mana. They didn't have anything above that anyway, so it didn't cost them anything. And it was good in their deck, so they just were able to get to it. And I think The decks that get the free roll these cards still do it, because a lot of the times it's just a great mana flood contingency plan. I play Luros and Burn because accidentally I drew the land half of my deck, and now I get to play Luros and rebuy my Goblin Guides. So and decks like Blue-White Control that can just play Yorion in the sideboard and not really work too hard to accomplish that. And the Yorion's good in that deck anyways because it's very easy for them to find a moment where they have 3 extra mana open. And
yeah, I think Yorion is one of the big winners here because its deck building restriction is so minimal for the decks that want to play it. And those decks are looking to play a long game where they don't necessarily mind like spending 3 mana to draw a ton of cards later.
Like the fact that you like on turn 5 can just like hold up Remand and then find a Yorion, right? Like that's just an option I have. Or
I think Yorion to me is the clearest example of where this card is almost unchanged. It's less efficient. It feels more like you're playing a fair control game. So it probably feels like you're having to work a little harder. But the difference of spending that 3 mana to draw an extra card and control, they don't care. If control was to be like, yeah, you get to start with a clue and play every game and it draws you Yorion, control will be like, awesome. That's a great deal for me.
Yeah, so like that's definitely one that I think is just like a slam dunk, going to continue to be powerful. I think Luros being as powerful as it does, I think there's more of an interesting conversation about is it main deckable versus playing in the sideboard, and then the deck that I'm actually most the 2 decks I have a big question on. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on. The first one is decks that have to modify their mana to be able to play Luros, but he's a free bill, like kind of a free choice, where best examples are like Merfolk having to now play a lot of white, or Infect having to play black instead of just being a straight blue-green deck, really kind of making their mana base a lot more painful. Is a card like Luros more worth it now for them? Is it worth kind of that payment? Because that's a cost. Like if Luros is saying you have to have cards under this mana cost plus your mana base, your life total now starts at 16 to be able to function. That's more and more costs added to him, and him costing 6 mana to get into play maybe is not worth it.
Yeah, you're saying basically decks that would have to spend a lot of resources to get Luros in their hand.
Just
it becomes...
add a color, right? It's now there's not only the choice of restricting my deck, not getting Mirror Regery, but I also have to add a third color or second color in my deck. That means my mana base is going to do damage to me throughout the game versus before when I was kind of health positive.
Well, here's the thing. If you were to look at me right now and say, hey, so every deck you've ever played in Modern, right? If you could somehow see a statistic of every single game I've ever played in Modern, and if I had played those games with 14 cards in my sideboard instead of 15 cards, what percentage of games would I have lost? More. You see what I'm saying? How much worse would my win percentage have been? I think the answer to the question is, I don't know, like less than 1%. It probably makes very, 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 very little difference. Maybe it's higher than I think, but I think those decks don't care. Like they don't have to work that hard because it's one sideboard slot. It's still an extra card.
I'm not really talking about sideboard. I mean, sideboard is a whole conversation, right? Because that was one of the things Wizards was considering, and I have thoughts on that. But more like modifying the main deck, right? Like your mana base is now worse than it would normally be because you're 3 colors versus 2 colors, but you get Luros. Is that worth it now that Luros costs 6 versus before? Absolutely worth it. Worth making your mana base worse to get Luros.
Because you could grab out into it.
But if you now have to try getting 2 white into play in a deck that previously was mono blue on turn 3, or if you're trying to get 2 black into play on a deck that was blue-green before on turn 3, especially that deck is playing like Inkmoth Nexuses and Pendle Havens, which make that even harder.
Let me see if I understand your question. So just because and then Michael, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm a little confused. So you're saying that those decks, when they could curve out into something that was maybe the wrong colors for them, but because they could curve out into it, it was 100% worth it. But the idea that those decks now have to pay 3 and then also pay the life, it maybe is not worth it.
Right. I guess I'm saying that those decks were on the edge on Luros worth it theoretically because of this life payment, and now have they been pushed over it to make it no longer worth it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was like being able to play Luros on curve necessarily for those decks. It was more like it gave you a lot of late game resilience because, if you're Infect against a deck that's just killing all your creatures or whatever, you then have this late game option of Luros, and being a very efficient 3 mana card is much better than being a less efficient 6 mana card. Still does the same thing, but is it worth like the mana base issues that you would be running yourself into?
I just don't think you're going to play the card. I just don't think you're going to play the card with the same intention, right? So like, I start thinking about Luros now, and I go, okay, like let's just pretend that I was looking at a concept deck that I wanted to build, right? Let's just even take, for example, like pretend it was Hunted Hansen, that old deck that I used to play. So love Hunted Horror, great card, really, really unique card, very, 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 very unique printing, but there's only 4. I can't play 8 of those cards. So maybe I look at that card and I go, okay, this would be an interesting thing to tune around, where I play Lurrus as my 15th card in my sideboard, so that late game I can start to recur my best threat over and over again, because now I have a really, really consistent way to know that when I hit this level, I'll always be able to. I don't know. Like I just mean, like I think the usefulness of the cards changes. I don't think you're going to play them just like this. The card is 3 mana slower, but I'll play it the same way. I don't think that's going to happen in most cases.
But like Lurrus is interesting, right? Because Lurrus and Urion is another example, right? Both of them were decks that grind. Urion in more of a control finisher fashion, and Lurrus in much more of a like classic grindy John mid-range deck fashion. But like that, they haven't. Adding 3 mana to that type of strategy doesn't affect them as much as some other strategies, right? Like Obosh is a lot worse because it was played in red-green decks that wanted to like be aggressive and then cast it and win.
And the companions that you need to play on curve, or at least like as quickly as possible, like Obosh and Jiryuda, and even like kind of Kahira.
In the tribal
a lot
decks,
of those are just like nearly unplayable now, because having to pay 8 mana for Obosh is just nothing that a deck that would be interested in playing Obosh would ever be interested in.
But one of the strengths of Lurrus in Merfolk was I'm going against an opponent 1-1, right? I'm playing cards, they're playing cards. They are killing every one of my threats. But in the late game, on turn 6, once they've done that a few times, I can now play Lurrus or rebuy another threat and then just keep casting threats every turn, Lord of Atlantis. And then from that point on, just keep buying threats where my opponent has now run out of removal spells. But before you took that pain, the life loss, now you're taking that life loss in games you don't need Lurrus as much. Because the problem is that Lurrus mitigated the non-grindy matchups by also being good against aggro, by being a 3/2 lifelink. That is now bad. And so your mana base hurting you is a worse negative, I think is my point.
And Merfolk is like has 2 layers, because you are giving up some cards that you would play if you didn't, like if you decided not to play Lurrus, you would get back Mirror Regery. Maybe you play Master of Waves or something like that.
Kira,
like you have some more options. Yeah, Kira. Like you lose a lot of your kind of disruptive, protective. Well, I guess that's not true because your whole deck is disruptive, protective guys. But you lose Kira. You lose the Merfolk version of Kira, whose name I'm blanking on.
Yeah,
no, I know it's called Kopala.
Yes,
Kopala,
yes.
Yeah.
So you do actually give up cards in your deck. It's not just a mana based concern, because we've seen Merfolk splash Bolt, Push, Path plus sideboard cards before, like depending on the meta. So it's not like outrageous to be just splashing white, but you give up those cards. I think it's like also interesting for Infect, where you're not giving up any cards. There's nothing you want to play in your main deck that excludes you from playing Lurrus. The question is, like, is it worth it to play black in this deck? Like, how many matches are you going to lose to an aggro deck because you like had to fetch shock one too many times, And
I think they're a little bit better off too. Like, in fact, because they play Noble Hierarch, right? And Noble Hierarch can cast the white half of Lurrus. Yep. And classically Bug, in fact, is a deck, right? Like, and black based. In fact, you also get other cool sideboard options. You get the black Infect Knight with First Strike that has pro white, pro red.
If you board that in, no Lurrus.
Correct. Yeah. You would be, but I would be boarding that in against like Burn, where Lurrus is maybe not the best, especially now. And you maybe bring in both, right? Like, that's what's cool. Something that is cool now is Lurrus's ability to be like companions don't have to stay in your sideboard. Before, it was objectively wrong to to take them out of there. But now, because there's a real cost, like, is this 3 mana tutor worth it? I can bring Lurrus into my main deck. And there is even a cool, I think, Michael, you mentioned this, people playing Death Shadow decks where Lurrus starts in their sideboard. They have 1 Lurrus in their sideboard with Street Wraith still being played. But then in games where they realize they need to be grindier as a guarantee, they can bring Lurrus and side out the Street Wraiths, which are normally better in aggro decks anyways, aggro matchups or fast matchups, and then now have access to Lurrus from the sideboard. So they can kind of move it into the companion slot.
The example was when Lurrus first got spoiled, and somebody was saying, like, in Traverse Shadow in particular, you could play the Lurrus main and Traverse for it. And then game 2, you board Lurrus and Street Wraiths out, and now you make Lurrus companion. And I thought that was like a clever use of companion that we haven't really seen a lot of. But now that there is a real cost to companions, people are like not going to be as like sideboard cards are maybe worth more than a companion now.
Right.
Like maybe you as merfolk, you have Kira's in your sideboard for, matchups with a ton of removal. I guess that's also the matchups for Luris is good in, but I don't know. As an example, assuming that's good, you board in the Kira's and then you maybe want to board in Luris, or maybe you leave them in the sideboard or whatever. But like boarding out of your companion is probably going to be more common.
What are some examples of cards that exist where you basically are never using them from your hand, but they cost you mana or a resource to come from somewhere else? Like I would think that Dredge probably has some cards like this that we're used to that actually cost you something to get out of the graveyard.
Dredge itself is that, right? Like just Dredge 6.
Card
Grave Control is I don't spend mana, and because I have this thing in another zone, I draw 6 cards.
Serum powder is kind of like that, where like where like they're before game effect.
The ley lines. I'm trying to think. The ley lines.
Yeah, but so okay, the ley lines are free. Serum powder is like a free, replacement effect. I'm trying to think of like, okay, all those creatures they print where it's like if this is in your graveyard, you can pay 3 mana and X, and it goes to play. It comes to play tap, like skeletons and stuff like that.
Sure.
I'm just trying to think if there's an example of one of those that costs you mana specifically and is good and has been playable. Because that's like sort of what I'm equating these two now, right? If they cost you mana, they're always going to be available based on your game plan.
Except you have to get them to that zone, right? Like you have to then work, and some of those cards are good, right? Like the what's the 4 mana discard 2 cards and you can put in the play makes a 1/1 if it's in your graveyard.
Haunted Dead,
like that card's a ton of play.
That's like the card that I'm thinking of, right? And I guess to some degree, like Conflagrate. Did you just say Conflagrate?
Yeah,
lingering souls in general.
Yeah,
anytime you have Liliana in the play.
Lingering Souls, though, I guess is tough because if you draw Lingering Souls, it's still good. But yeah, Lingering Souls is a great example of like a card that you specifically want to use it as a card you can discard for a better effect, or like you mill it, you're like totally happy with it. Like that's always been great. I mean, even though 2 1/1s is not that good, it's still great. Like still just great to be able to get it.
And I think actually a good example is Genesis, just the card, right? And like this has never seen play in Modern, even though I think it was added in Modern Horizons, right? Yeah. But that was a card that saw play in Standard and has seen play in Constructed play when it was, in other formats, when it was legal. And that card's similar to that, right? Like for 3 mana, you get a creature from your graveyard into your hand. You have to take that turn off, and it's like upkeep, right? So it's at the worst possible moment. But like in grindier matchups, that was really good. So that's actually a good example of like finding a situation where, in the right decks do want a grindy threat sometimes. Now you brought up sideboard cards. I do want to kind of touch upon that because I do think your question of like how many times, if you had one less sideboard card, how many tournaments do you win or lose compared to what you lost? And I think that's a scale towards the like. If someone is regularly day 2ing GPs and playing through the second day of a GP, that's going to be more likely because the more games you play, the more likely you'll need every sideboard card. And if you're just
I guess on the flip side of it, if you were to tell me like these people that consistently day 2 GPs have been playing with 16 card sideboards this whole time, I would be like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. If you're a player that is that skilled, who is grinding out the numbers that consistently, your access to like a third copy is significant. Like, and you play a lot, you construct even like, decks that can like tutor out of the sideboard, like your Glittering Wish type of effects. I mean, you get really clever with that stuff.
Well, and Paulo Vito Dama de Rosa wrote a really good article almost 3-4 years ago now, which is insane. But for Eternal Fireball, kind of going over things he would change in Modern. And one of his big points is he'd make it like a 20 card sideboard.
20 card sideboard. I remember that article.
He felt that one of the issues with the format is it's so many different strategies and it's so wide of a field and you have no idea what you're going to be coming into every turn that your sideboard is much more stretched in what it can do, and having the right answers you'll need for different matchups, and having more sideboard slots would maybe mitigate that problem a little bit or make the format a little bit easier to kind of be prepared for. So it's interesting with that concept, and then companions come in and are like, no, you don't need 15 cards. You just need 14 cards. This card's that good. And now that cards cost 3 mana, do you want that extra card? I still think you don't. Like Yes, it's such a hard. It's kind of like it's what's almost like looking at the top card of your library after you lose a game and seeing what your next card was. Like it's such a hard data point to keep track of. Where there is probably a correct answer, right? You probably do want all 15 cards, but you won't notice it very often.
I guess it's a question of like, do you think your total win percentage is going to increase if your deck gets 5% better in every matchup because sometimes you draw an extra card? Or do you get more percentage points by having your 15th sideboard card, your least important sideboard card that you added at the last minute in the couple of matchups where you want to board it in?
Right. It's almost a mitigation between like mana flood is way less bad for you than other people, or you'll be able to hedge your bets against affinity and dredge at the same time a little bit better.
I mean, that 15th card, the funny part is I'm arguing against the 15th card in the sense that I think having a guaranteed power card you can know you're getting means you'll still be able to construct your deck around it a little bit. But I also know that when I'm building a sideboard for a tournament, I always am like scratching my head for that 15th card. Like, you know, like I always have 22 cards I want to play in my sideboard. So it's definitely valuable. It's not like something I ignore. I just think that in reality, how it actually affects the game is less significant than it seems.
And I think that's one of the goals of having a good sideboard guide, right? But going into a tournament and knowing, at least for the major top 10 decks in a format, what your sideboard plan is ahead of time is valuable. Because on the other side of that, I've definitely gone to a tournament being like, oh, I don't know what cards I'm going to have in my sideboard. Okay, I'm going to play these ones. And then I get into matchups where like, oh, right, graveyard hit. I have that. And then I realize I don't have enough cards to take out of my deck for the amount of cards I brought in for the matchup, which means that I could have cut one of those sideboard cards, no problem. And in those situations, if I had Luros available, am I better off? Maybe. And so figuring out what that looks like. I go back and forth. I think, and this is kind of what the whole joke with Kahira, right? That's the cat antler.
Yeah.
Like they thought this was one of the main considerations for control decks that have no creatures in it, right? Is it worth playing this 3/2? And it ended up that Yorion was just a better choice anyways. Going to 680 cards was just better for them. But is it worth it to then make that sacrifice? Like, oh, I think the sacrifice of a sideboard slot is actually a real consideration for them. And now I think this isn't as good of a conversation because I'd rather have Snapcaster Mage and Stoneforge Mystic than that card. And I'd rather just be playing Yorion on top of that. But I think at one point they thought that this sideboard conversation was a serious consideration. And I just am leaning towards it being less so because if I had to choose, if anything, I'm choosing the sideboard slot that I would have for Jund to be this companion, right? Like, that's what I'm really doing, is I'm saying my grindy matchups are better now. Versus...
Right, some companions, like, do shore up matchups in a way that a sideboard card might, right? Like, you need one less card that grinds if you have Luris as your companion in your sideboard. So maybe if you were... Jund before, you would have like an extra, I don't know, maybe you had like a Phyrexian Arena in your sideboard or something, or an extra Planeswalker, I guess, like a Chandra Torture Defiance. But now you have Luris instead. Is Luris like as good in your hand as Chandra Torture Defiance? Maybe not. Depends on how you built your deck. But like
comparable.
Yeah, it's a comparable card, and you just cut that grindy card out of your sideboard, and instead you get a free card every game that does something very similar. And Yorion is like that as well. Like, it's another card where in a grindy matchup where you're trading a lot of resources, you just play it, draw 4 cards, and win. And it's a threat on top of that, like if you need to pressure opponents' Planeswalkers and stuff. So like it kind of also can take the slot of a sideboard card. Not every companion is like that. Like Gigantha, I think we'll still see play because it's free in a lot of decks for like humans or some Tron builds. But it's like, it doesn't do anything.
Right, it just shores up your mana screw moment. And I think that also, and that actually, that segues kind of the next one is Jund, because I think Jund has a different interesting conversation that we touched about a little bit with Infect, is the cost of the restrictions now are real. Like with Jund specifically, you are sacrificing at least 2 classically powerful cards, if not more, by playing Luros in your sideboard. You lose.
You don't get to play Liliana.
You lose Bloodbraid Elf. Blah 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 blah. You lose Bloodbraid Elf. You lose what's the clue, Mr. Clue Man?
Tracker.
Tracker. You lose Tracker. You lose. So like by losing these cards, your deck is kind of worse. I mean, it's debatable, I guess, and the power level of those cards versus just playing like 8 Bobs with Ren and 6. But I think that now there's a real conversation. Is the Loros engine in my sideboard worth it? Or maybe should I just be main decking it, and then once in a while I can sideboard out of it? Thoughts?
Am I wrong? I've said it a couple times, but you haven't acknowledged. You do lose Liliana. It is better to be able to play that card now. No?
But you do lose Liliana. I don't know if it's better to play Liliana. That's my asking, right? Okay. Is Liliana the Veil in your main deck better than Loros in your sideboard?
John does strike me as a deck that could pay 3 mana at sorcery speed to put a companion in your hand, because you're looking to like trade resources with your opponent a bunch, 1 for 1, draw a couple extra cards along the way, and then like once you've ground them out, you kill them with a Tarmogoyf or a Raging Ravine or something. But now like you can be playing Lurrus, and the mana is like not as relevant because you have time. Like you're looking to make the game go long enough that you have time to get Lurrus out of your board.
Mm-hmm.
But also like are giving up like very good cards that are important to your strategy. Less so than like the Merfolk discussion where like you're giving up cards that are like good but not like central to your strategy the way like Liliana and Bloodbraid Elf are. So maybe it's like more worth it in Merfolk a little bit, even given the mana concerns.
Yeah, I mean, because both of them have their weird sacrifices. Merfolk, you're losing Mara Regery. You're losing the Merfolk Ben mentioned that he was able to.
Kopala, you lose Master of Waves. You definitely lose options.
And in Jund, you lose Bloodbraid Elf, Liliana's A and B. Lose, and so
any of the 4-drops, Kalidas, you lose any of the Planeswalkers that are good, like other than obviously Liliana or Ren and 6. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, definitely. I think, I think I agree with you, Michael. That feels like Lurrus fits pretty well into Jund's game plan. You're getting a lot of velocity out of your 2-drops in that deck. So just having it, I mean, it's a little bit, it's the same thing I was saying with the hunted deck, right? It's just actually playing good cards. It means that late game, you just like, cash in your token and now you just get to loop your 2-drops forever. You don't really care that it's like costs you the extra turn or whatever.
But the slight difference. Yeah, I think we can all pretty much agree that like Jund is a deck that can handle having to spend a turn getting these 3 mana, right? Like it and like the amount of games that you and me, Ben, have played where I'm playing Jund and I get to the point where I'm just like looping Loam and Raging Ravine. Like that's a thing that I have done in Jund to great effect. This is comparable to its grindiness capabilities, but in that deck I could also play Liliana the Veil. I could play Bloodbraid Elf. I'm sacrificing powerful cards in my deck. Yorion blue-white control deck or Kira blue-white control decks are sacrificing Stoneforge Mystic Snapcaster Mage in their deck. You're sacrificing powerful cards. And in some of these decks, the sideboard option of getting this companion is not worth it. But in Jund, because it's Lurrus we're talking about, which is still such a powerful card, it might be.
I want to talk a little bit about the standard bannings and the historic restrictions as well, but I do actually have one last thought on this particular subject of Jund that just came to me. So when you're playing like a Lurrus on curve in the previous model where you just curve into it, it's really good, even if they know it's coming. It doesn't matter. The element of surprise makes basically no difference because it's a blunt force object at that point. Like you just have a really powerful thing in your deck. Your deck is tuned to take advantage of it. But if you're paying the 3 extra mana to cast something that costs 3 or sometimes 4 or 5 mana, not only does it cost you more, but the turn it probably takes you to get it into your hand completely gives away the element of surprise where now they 100% know that's what you're going to be doing the next turn. And I don't actually know that Modern is a format that if you're just like tipping your hat, like or you get to like 7 mana, so you like pay it and cast it the same turn, which is a lot in Modern. I don't actually know that that's going to maneuver around the possibility of you casting it and then them just like killing it immediately.
Well, but that's
right. Like you cast your thing, they pass it. Like it. That's
not too much different than what's going on now, other than you like wasted 3 mana through that process, right? Most of the companions that we're seeing play have a ETB or you can maintain priority ability, and the ones that don't that we're seeing play are almost being played more as a free roll. So that's like Gigantha, right? Like more than any of the other ones, that one's seeing play because it just is, it can. It costs me nothing. I'm not doing anything different. Obosh, immediately that attack you get to go off. Gyruda, you like win the game. It's like a Snapcaster Mage in your sideboard.
Ben is saying though is that like they do become easier to play against. Like if you're playing against a
That's
Jiryuta combo deck or a Yorion deck, and that you like see that they have a bunch of permanents in play, and if they play Yorion, they're probably going to win. You might be holding up a Mystical Dispute. The problem is you have to hold up Mystical Dispute like every turn
the
forever.
entire game. Yeah, right. And so it's
now,
go ahead.
Yeah, but now it's like, oh, well, they don't have 9 mana to play their Jiryuta, so I can wait. Like, oh, they put it in their hand. Now I got to hold up Dispute.
Right.
It becomes super grindy and a matter of inevitability, and it's fine. But I think it's also the kind of thing that worries me less. Like I don't think you get quite as much of an advantage when the velocity is slower. You like lose a lot more of that, and when you're not casting it on curve on 3 or 4 mana, it fits into the context of what a modern deck is normally doing a lot less.
I think
like things that
was the goal, right? Like this is exactly what they wanted. They wanted people that were playing Companion to be able to be interacted with in a way that they previously weren't. That's what you're describing, right? And they wanted the choices on whether you want to play it or not to be a real one. Now, the internet's saying these cards aren't going to see play. That's, I think, wrong. Is I think what we're generally coming to, correct?
I think they will continue to see play. Yes, yeah. I think that there's enough of a consideration that people are going to try playing them in their main decks that might turn out to be better than people think, and also that I do think the right ones will still see play as card number 15 in your sideboard 100%. I mean, if it's just from a base level as an experienced Magic player in Eternal formats, if you were to ask me, hey, there's a bunch of cards out there, there's 10 of them, and you can pay 3 mana and sacrifice a sideboard card to get it into your hand at any point during the game. Do you think that's something you'd play? And it's like, of course I'd play that. There's going to be tons of situations where that's useful to my deck. Like that just will be a thing that gets played. Won't be as dominating, but it will 100% get played.
So that's a question. Was it enough? We're just talking about how like most Luros decks that we're seeing play, other than maybe the like Collected Company style ones that were Devoted Druid that like they needed to get Luros to work. Did they go far enough? Are some of these cards still going to need to be banned? Yorion and Luros specifically. We just kind of went through an entire episode talking about neither. Like, Luros is still great. Most decks we brought up, kind of the answer is like, yeah, probably you still play it. And Yorion, I don't think there was a single thing.
Talking about how now there's a choice, the way that it didn't feel like there was a choice before with Luros. I mean, I think Luros is the most interesting one because it's like the most powerful, but it has like a real restriction in Modern in a way that it doesn't in Legacy. That's why it's banned in Legacy, banned in Vintage, because the restriction like is completely irrelevant in those formats. But in Modern, like most decks are playing like 3-drops, and there are a few that aren't, and they get a free Luris like Boggles and Infect and whoever. But Jund, for example, which was like a big part of the metagame with Luris in it like has to sacrifice for it. So
yeah, I think also, Alex, like to answer your question, I mean, think about it from the perspective too of like these cards are really good, but Modern's really good. Like a lot of really good things have been printed in the last year that affected Modern, but didn't make it so that the deck they were in became the only deck you'd play, right? Like Blue White Control first got 5 mana Teferi and was great, and then it got 3 mana Teferi and it got even better. It's not the only deck people play; it's a great deck, So like Yorion will make that deck great, and slower Yorion will still make that deck or a similar Blink style deck great. I mean, you again, same thing. Ren and 6. Great card, unbelievably good card in Jund, super value oriented. Doesn't make Jund the only deck people play. It's just a very good card.
Well, but 2 weeks ago, the decks seeing play were diverse. It's just all of them were playing a companion, right?
Yeah.
Like you had everything from Burn to Devoted Druid combo to Control with 80 cards to Obosh Red Green Aggro to Gigantha Humans, right? There's a whole wide variety, but they're all playing companions. If we go into next week, or if Modern develops again with this new rule, and all the decks are still playing companions, and there's just less of different companions, like is that it? Like that's a possibility, right? It's still possible that they're just as powerful as they were. Yeah.
No, I think. Look, I think about it like this: if companions are 10 cards that came from one set, right? That means that there's 10 cards that become, and not all 10, right? Like not all 10 companions
7.
really see play. Like 7 companions see play. Okay. Think about the power of the sets that we just mentioned from the last couple of years. There are 7 cards from Modern Horizons that when that set got printed became staples in all of Modern for sure. Immediately, 7 cards at least. Same thing with War of the Spark, right? Like you figure they are 7 cards that are really good, and if they're in every single deck, fine. As long as they don't dominate and make the play pattern identical every game, which I think the new rule means they won't, they just feel like really good cards from their respective set.
Well, but not every deck in Modern played a War of the Spark card that had like the
Yeah.
variety of game. Not every deck played a War of the Spark card. Also, the variety of gameplay provided by the War of the Spark cards, and War of the Spark's not the best example because of Planeswalkers, but like even Neoform versus Karn versus Teferi are different play styles. So it's not like with like the cards we described, it's value based engine creatures that come down on turn 6, right?
Right.
Like that's basically what it is. And if every deck that is good has to play that, even yeah, Michael.
I do think there's a bit of a repetitive gameplay issue. I mean, like it's mitigated by the fact that you're not just playing turn 5 Obosh every game or whatever, turn 5 Yorion every game. Like you have to now pick your spot to play it a little more carefully, which makes games somewhat less repetitive. But at the end of the day, like a lot of decks are still just going to be like 1 for 1, 1 for 1. Okay, we're in the late game. Here's Luris. Get back my Mishra's Bauble. Like,
yeah,
you know, that is still going to exist for these like late game companions that we think are more playable, or Yorion, where it's like, I'm going to play my Omen of Thassa and my Astrolabe and like my random stuff, or Omen of the Sea, and like just play some random stuff and Path Your Guy and Supreme Verdict, and then here's Yorion on turn 8 instead of 5.
Right.
Like,
I mean, my argument when we talked about companions and printing more of them, for them was that the argument then was the decks were diverse. It's not like the decks weren't doing different things, but because companions did the same thing every time they happened and every deck was playing them, the repetitive gameplay was the problem. It was more the reason people didn't like that format wasn't because I didn't get to play a cool different deck that felt my play style. It was because every single deck was playing Luros on turn 3 or Yorion on turn 4 or Obosh on turn 5. And I don't. What if that's still is this rule? So I mean, it sounds like Ben, you're saying that yes, you think this rule is enough to nerf them to the point where they won't be a problem anymore.
I think Modern is a powerful enough format that it should be able to maneuver around feeling like every single game and every deck is repetitive when you have to pay the mana you have to. I think that's what I would guess. I don't think they're nerfed. I think they're still good, just they're not going to be like dominating Modern in the same way. They won't, I think, have an unfun play pattern in quite the same way.
Michael.
I think Wizards' goal with Companion was always that you would see in every format, basically, some decks that do play Companions and some decks, and you would see a few different Companions getting played. Probably not all of them. Some of them are like definitely more leaning towards casual play or whatever. But you would see a few different Companions in every format, and you would also see a good number of decks that were not playing. And I feel like with this change, we're going to see that. I think the number of Companions that got nerfed into the ground with this change is such that there's maybe like 3 playable Companions now, or 4, with like maybe Fringe, Kahira, Cat, or Beast Tribal or something. But like for the most part, there's like the number of Companions getting played is going to be drastically lower. But I think the trade-off is you will now start to see decks that decide a Companion is not worth it because it's not this overwhelmingly powerful effect. It's like you have to take a big tempo hit to put it into your hand, and then it's vulnerable to counter magic or discard or whatever. And so maybe.
So similar question. So say they're not repetitive, right? Like say like decks aren't like you don't have the repetitive format. It's like not every game is playing out the same, but 75% of decks or more are playing a companion still, right? Like just the free roll of modifying my deck to some of the easier ones to be able to make sure I don't get mana flooded 90 and 5%, whatever games that was happening is worth it. And so they're all playing them. They don't always play them in a way that is efficient. They maybe don't cast them as many games, right? They're less played from a percentage of per game, but they are in a similar percentage of decks. Is that problematic?
Not at the rate not at the like the rate of play that I expect them to be a relevant part of the game. Like I'm
saying I'm giving you the rate of play, right? Like I'm saying most of every deck in the format is playing a companion, but they aren't showing up in every game, or they're not showing up even in half the games. Not most.
Then I don't think it's a problem.
Okay.
Then I don't think it's a problem.
So it's fine if just every deck has one in the sideboard, but it's not.
I mean, the trade-off is that so few of them are playable now that if that's true, instead of seeing like every deck is playing a companion, but the number that we gave was 7 of them are seeing play, for example, now every deck is playing one and there's only 3 seeing play, which limits like the colors people are playing. It limits like the types of strategies that people are playing because you know, like a lot of these decks are just looking to grind more, perhaps. I mean, I guess like Burn and Boggles are not looking to grind. They're just playing Luris because it's free.
Yeah, I mean, some of the decks that we mentioned would just play Luros because it's free. Yeah. Like you.
I also think though, Alex.
In fact,
I don't think, Alex, if you again from the perspective of like new cards that were introduced in War of the Spark, if we get away from that analogy, but we just link it to like, okay, 1-drop pieces of direct interaction in Modern. Let's say Path, Bolt, Push, and Thoughtseize. How many games do you play in which your opponent plays one of those cards against you if you play 15 games at a GP? I would have to think it's like 85% of games or something like that. You know what I mean? Like
you probably could argue it's closer to 100. Not 100, but like close.
Yeah, a level of redundancy that is high enough that if we were bothered by seeing the same cards show up so often, we would not be happy with Magic. And I'm fine with those cards. So I actually think that's my expectation is you'll see redundancy. You just won't see it in a way that feels like it's game breaking. So that's what I think.
Okay.
I think that's a good way of putting it because, yeah, you're not going to see it on turn 5 100% of games anymore or whatever. Like, no, 100% of games, Bosch turn 5, 100% of games, Luris turn 3 with a bobble. Like, you're right. You'll see it maybe as frequently. Like, even if they get played at the same rate, you're only going to see them as frequently as you would see, like, a Path or something.
Right, yeah. Like, if you're playing 100% of games, same. Like, if 100% of the games I play in a GP, I play against an opponent with a companion, I think it's, like, almost 25% of games will that companion actually be played compared to before where it was 100% of games, right? So, like, I think that mitigates them still being ubiquitous if they end up being that way a little bit more.
I think also on that point, and you mentioned this a second ago, Michael, with the Death Shadow thing, it's not always going to be this way, but if you show up and you show me Luris in your sideboard in your Jund deck, I have a pretty good feeling I'm not going to have to worry about you playing Liliana on turn 3. I feel pretty confidently I know what's in your deck a little bit more than I otherwise would.
You know for sure. Unless I know the companion rule wrong, but if you say Luros is your companion, and if I have Liliana in the Veil in my deck, I get a game loss.
That's true. So it's not just you can't cast Luris that game?
Correct. No, if you're saying it is your companion, you are stating that it is a rule that your deck can't have that in your deck.
Got it. Okay, so I thought that it was a question you could only play it. So then even more so. If you show me Luris, I then know, okay, I don't have to worry about my Geist getting killed when I play it by your Liliana. Like there's a lot. It's a different. You play differently. It's information, right? So I think even then they become a little bit worse when they're not hitting your normal curve.
Right. You are losing stuff here, right? And there were negatives to companions that they thought would have been a natural check on them to begin with. Card selection, sideboard slot, information. But before the extra card and the value and how powerful they were mitigated that no problem. So now the question is, where on that scale do they fall? And I think I do think what'll be really interesting is to see also if we move to a world where they're not that great in the sideboard all the time or at all. I do think we might start seeing some of them just main deck play. Like some of these cards are just good, right? Like Garuda is a good example of it, just like Snapcaster Mages in that deck. Luros is a great example where like if it didn't have companion, it would still be probably the most played card out of Ikoria in Eternal formats, I think. And it wouldn't have been banned maybe in some of the older ones, but like just that by itself is really good. So maybe you just play 4. Maybe the ability to like have it so it doesn't, if they kill it, you just can get another one out of your deck is worth the cost of not having it as your companion. And then the funny joke is you can always sideboard into it being your companion if that's something you want to try doing.
That's what I think you're going to see more of with the powerful ones. That's my expectation because I think Luris is a powerful enough card that I think we're just going to see that. So
I think it depends, right? Like Luris is a great, but I don't think Urion does that. I don't think that card's good enough unless it's a companion.
Agreed.
Unless you're like a weird, I guess blue-white blink, right? Like a decks that previously were taking advantage of
Venser, like that kind of a thing.
But like those weren't, those are like tier 3 modern decks that could that'll maybe play because it's just a great the flicker engine.
Drawing multiple Yorions and having it take up a slot in your hand when you need interaction is like pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty.
You can like it's never gonna rot in your hand. You can play it out on turn 3. And like drawing multiples is not as heinous, I feel, because like the one that's in play is continuously generating value. And if they kill it, you got another one.
Right.
Whereas Yorion, you like play Yorion, draw 2 more Yorions. You're like,
yeah, I know. I have an air elemental.
So guys, I want to I hit the mic. I'm not doing the hands. So
That's for you, patrons in Marshall.
So guys, I want to talk a little bit about the standard bannings and the historic suspensions before we wrap up today. But before I do, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to a brand new thing I've been working on. You guys heard it last week. Nerds and Suits is this new YouTube channel I've got. It's both audio and video. YouTube.com/Nerds and Suits. I'm doing like one-on-one interviews with people, and then the show called Song from the Scene, where I basically record songs from great movies and talk about why the scenes are so great. And it's my birthday this weekend. I turned 32 on Saturday, and I'm doing a live stream with a huge announcement on the channel this Saturday at 5 p.m. So if you're probably hearing this on a Friday, probably have one more day to get to 2,000 subs. We're not that close, but a bunch of you guys were awesome last week and you want to subscribe, then it would really mean the world to me. I'm working my butt off on it. So go check it out. See if you like the content. There's a lot of fun stuff on there, and I would very much appreciate it.
Oh, I need to change your what your you says from Watch Point Blank to Watch Nerds and Suits.
I don't know. Point Break's pretty great.
Subscribe. Yeah, Point Break is really great. Also, how do you feel about that? Me and Michael have decided that you're a Sobble.
A what?
A Sobble.
Well, he just got the leftover Pokemon.
That's fair.
I don't think that he's a Sobble.
Well, but he wears a suit. Sobble wears a suit. Sobble's like
WTF's
the final
Sobble
version of Sobble, right?
Oh, sure.
Inteleon.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know. Sobble was the water starter Pokemon from Sword and Shield.
The defining characteristic is sad.
But then he becomes James Bond.
Yeah, it turns into a secret agent for some reason.
Yeah, he's like mopey, and then he becomes emo. Very like you with your blue hair in high school phase. And then
it was middle school,
and then becomes like only suit all the time. Sniper water Pokemon, James Bond kind of esque. So,
okay.
I think Inteleon is the closest. I don't. Yeah.
Let's talk about standard.
And Michael is a. Oh, why am I forgetting? What are you? Grookey. Thank you.
Nerds.
This is Grookey, and this is Michael. He wants everyone to read Saga, and then
you can't read.
What?
Or I can't read it on your camera.
You can read here.
Probably better quality.
Yeah. Saga's really sweet, by the way, Michael. I love Saga.
And then I'm a score bunny, and everyone should watch Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I heard that show sucks.
You're a monster, and we all hate you. You sad chameleon.
Standard bannings. So we had a couple bannings. We had the banning of Agent of Treachery and the banning of Fires of Invention, and then his historic. They were both suspended. So suspension, Michael, explain really quickly what suspension means versus banning or restriction, all that whatnot.
So in historic, because they add these like incredibly powerful cards in big batches more frequently, there's like more cards entering historic than are entering any other format pretty much, unless you count like, obviously supplementing products go into legacy, but I guess like more than standard and modern, like historic has like powerful cards entering randomly. So because of that, the metagame shifts a little bit more often because there's just like, hey, here's Burial Rites and Ulamog and, see what you can do with this. So they suspend cards instead of banning them outright, typically in historic, which just is like for, I think, 3 months. And then after 3 months has passed, based on where the metagame is, they will decide whether they think it's safe to reintroduce or not. And so they let Nexus of Fate back and they let Field of the Dead back, but not Oko, for example, or Once Upon a Time. They were suspended, and then when their time was up, they were like, these cards are broken and they should be banned in every format.
Do they also suspend in Pioneer, or they don't?
No, this is arena only.
Arena only, got it.
And kind of the difference.
Pioneer has cards entering the format at the same rate as standard and modern, just standard legal sets.
And a small difference is if a card is banned in arena, you get wild cards. If a card is suspended in arena, I don't believe you do get wild cards.
Got it.
If it does later get banned, you will get
the same cards, so it didn't matter this time.
Right.
I actually don't remember what happened when they suspended Nexus of Fate, or because I have those. But yeah, I don't think you get them for historic. Maybe if they suspended a card.
Wrong. Yeah.
I think if they suspend a card that's not legal in standard, they might, but I don't think that's happened yet.
Okay.
Typically, their line is, you can still play it in standard, so it's fine.
Right.
Got it.
And so, interesting thing is that Winota was like the main target that people thought needed to go, but it's a newer card, so people think that might be why it wasn't banned. And in Historic specifically, where Ancients of Treachery wasn't seeing play in the Winota decks, but Winota is like 55 to 75% of the metagame, that was where they thought it needed to go more, and they like got rid of Ancient of Treachery, which isn't going to hurt the deck.
It's that percentage of the metagame in one historic tournament that they held. They've only held one historic tournament since Ikoria came out, because they waited for Historic Anthology 3 to come out, because that's kind of what they do with Historic, is like the queue's not available when a set first comes out, because they want people to like play with the new cards in Standard. And then like a few months into a set's release, they'll come out, or I guess a month, they'll come out with the next Historic Anthology, and then they'll put Historic out. So Historic like just was a thing you could actually play on Arena, and the first tournament Winota was way overrepresented. But Wizards like must have looked at the ladder data and decided that it was not as good as everybody thought.
Or like Agents of Treachery, like because they have data like the games where Agents of Treachery were winning or were cast or were put into play are the ones that were more proportionally being won by Winota decks maybe than not, but we don't know. It was also hitting Luca, right? Like it's hitting both of those cards, which I think was part of their goal, was that there's two different cards that were cheating in a play. And it's interesting because
Bant ramp decks in Standard, if they just banned Fires, like Bant ramp would just become the big like over the top control deck the way Fires was, and they would just be playing Agent hard casting it off of a Nissa mana or something.
Right.
Well, so on that note, let's talk really quickly, because so in Standard, Agent of Treachery and Fires and Invention were both banned, and I think actually both of them have interesting implications for how they relate to Modern. But then I think also the play pattern with those cards is interesting, right? Because like, so Agent of Treachery, I know we acknowledged, Alex, like when that card was previewed, we were not like, oh, that's going to be a haymaker. It was like, it's a 7 mana 2/3 that comes down, steals something, and then it has the weird text that if you control 3 or more permanents, which I feel like a lot of people just ignore even exists. But
I like didn't realize it had that text on it until 3 weeks ago when I like
like when you're cheating it into play with these cards, you can get multiples pretty easily, and then you play your Yorion or you bounce it with Teferi. Like I've had people draw 3 cards on me in Standard like a lot recently, but that's only because of like
recent reasons you can get most of them. There was another, and there's another card that you gain control of stuff that I've been able to pull off with it that also like helped there. So I've like have a few different ways that it's like been relevant. But
it's interesting, right? Because the way it fits right now into the format is that, as you mentioned, Michael, the ramp decks make it a card that actually is just like a castable card anyway. It's just a very good castable card, but it's the fact that it's good there. But also, if you cheat it in, and you can cheat it in early, stealing a land represents such an enormous advantage. I think it's just not fun. I think that's the thing about it that sucks, right? It's like if that actually gets pulled off against you early on, like the tempo of them stealing one of your lands is like pretty backbreaking.
Yeah, I've been playing Cycling, and I had a game against the Yorion Fires Luca, the like big bogeyman of Standard, and I had like a 6/6 Flourishing Fox or something, and they cheated an Agent of Treachery with Luca and stole a land, and I was like, what are they thinking? They should have stolen my Fox. And then they had a Fires in play. The next turn they go like Yorion, blink my agent, steal another land, play Teferi or something, bounce my Agent of Treachery, play it again because I didn't tap any mana for anything because I have a Fires in play, and the Yorion blinked the Fires, and they just like stole another land, and I just had like 1 land or something. And I was like, well, I guess you can chump block the Fox now, and I have no lands.
Yeah.
And which turn would you say this was happening?
I don't know, 6 or something.
Well, so that's, I mean, like, kind of taking, every time cards get banned in Standard or Pioneer, or even Historic, we kind of have a pretty long conversation on, is this a card that could see play in Modern, right? Like, oh, this has shown its power level, and this is a card that, and Agent of Treachery has kind of dominated Standard for a year.
For a while
like
now,
the best thing to cheat in the play somehow. Fires of the Invention have also kind of just been a tier 1 deck in Standard forever, and just now they've gotten to the point where they're powerful. And part of that is it had the birthing pod problem, right? The larger Standard was, the better Fires got. The more creatures that exist in a card pool that Birthing Pod have access to, the more likely it is to be broken. And, applying that logic to Modern should point to Fires being a card that has potential to see play, especially in a format where, like,
I don't
you
know
get
if
to
I
take
agree
on
that
everything.
it's a birthing pod like that.
Okay. I mean,
Like, I think
Wizards'
Birthing
announcement,
Pod-
they said an issue with it.
Pod was good in Modern because it could find combos, and like they didn't put any combos with it in Standard. So you needed the larger card pool to get access to those combos. Fire's Invention is not really a combo card in that way, but also like when you have access to more creatures with Birthing Pod, you can play like one Orzhov Pontiff in your deck that you couldn't play in Standard, and that shores up a bunch of matchups. And you can put one whatever in your deck, but that's not really true with Fires. Fires is just a mana doubler.
Well, but
It's just
but in Wizards' article, one of the things they said about it when they were talking about why they banned it was one of the issues is as we see the format getting larger, the more options you have and the more powerful level you have on being able to cheat powerful permanents into play. Now, maybe that's insinuating that just in M20 there's going to be, or M21 there's going to be more insane big threats, right? And that they just were worried that like, oh, this problem in this situation is going to be worse, not an overall problem with the card.
It doesn't let you play big stuff in the way of a typical mana doubler. It lets you play 2 5-drops. So it's just the quality of the 5-drops got too high with Luca and Yorion.
The stupid Cavaliers.
Also, are the power
Cavaliers and Kenrith have been like the go-tos for a long time. But yeah, I think the 5-drops got good. It was the problem. Is that like with Luca and Yorion entering the format and Vivian, there were Gruul Fires decks as well. I don't think they were a problem as much, but you know, just the quality of the 5-drops was such that it became a problem. Not so much.
And there's a lot of good 5-drops in Modern. Do you think that there's any shot that that becomes problematic in Modern? People look at the banning. I mean, I feel like that always happens. The standard banning happens, and then people start thinking about Modern aggressively, like, hey, can I break this?
So we have seen some Fires decks, like taking turns Fires decks are the ones that I think most in
Savor
Modern.
the moment, whatnot.
They're fun. I have it built on Modo.
There's just more efficient ways to cheat on mana in Modern, I think, like with Tron or Primeval Titan decks, or even Ponza with like the Arbor Elf Utopia Sprawl.
Into Garrick, into a million mana.
Well,
yeah, like I think those decks are just more efficient than Fires at making a lot of mana, and they do allow you to play like Ulamogs and stuff with your mana, whereas Fires is like, here's 2 mid-rangey 5-drops.
Though I will say that taking turns deck was really sweet, but then Companions got printed, you know, a month, like pretty quickly afterwards. So it would be interesting to see with the adjustments back to kind of a metagame that Companions aren't dominating as much, if decks like that get better. Because that deck had really interesting ways that it was strong and maybe can have a moment in the metagame again where stuff like Fire is a powerful card.
Correct me if I'm wrong, really quickly, just before we move off the Ponza thing, just because I was thinking about this. It is true, right, that with the Ponza Arbor Elf thing, with Utopia Sprawl and Garrick, you can get 7 mana on turn 2, right?
Think so, but I have to do the math. 1 drop, turn 2, you said?
Because you go Utopia Sprawl on turn 1 on your land.
Mm-hmm.
Turn 2, no, you have to you cast Arbor Elf turn 1.
Yes.
Turn 2, you tap to cast the Sprawl. Tap it for 2, untap it, retap it, cast Garrick, untap both lands. Now you can tap for 3 more mana, right?
Yes.
So now you generated 7 mana on turn 2.
You generated 7 mana over that turn. You don't have 7 mana.
You can't cast Karn on turn 2. No.
Correct. But you can then on turn 3 cast Karn. Or
that's why people play Ponza. Hey, also maybe they just like Stone Rain.
Yeah, it's true.
It ends up Stone Raining your opponent. Sometimes just wins you the game.
Right, like casting Garrick, doing the untap, and then Stone Raining, like just wins the game, pretty much.
But yeah, I think that both Fires decks can have different moments, and is a card that like I think like for instance, I think Fires has a higher chance of seeing play than Aetherworks and Energy decks did in Modern.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I think it's generically good, and your shell doesn't have to be about it as much. Versus Energy is just playing a bunch of bad cards that cheated in Emrakul.
So I will say that like the fail case of the Fires deck in Standard is like you're like a mid-range deck with a little bit higher curve because you have an emphasis on like 5-drops and maybe you're playing Agent of Treachery or whatever. But in Modern, a deck that looks like that is a lot worse. Like a deck with a high density of 5-drops with no way to cheat them out is like a lot worse than it would be in Standard.
So what if it's 4-drops, or what if it's I mean, like, does it have obviously 5-drops you gain the most value, but what if it's more like 3 to 5? Like, what if Jund Fires is a deck that like.
Yeah, so like you play your Fires, you like cast a, I don't know, like a what's his name?
I mean, I guess Bloodbraid Elf is terrible with fires, but you play Huntmaster of the Fells.
Or you play one of the Chandras, or you play the black.
Yeah, Chandra Torch of Defiance.
Yeah.
And then turn 2, you like Liliana into something else that you do with Chandra. I don't know. That seems more mediocre. I think just taking extra turns is the best thing you can do because you just can go infinite. With that,
yeah,
it allows you to like develop your hand by like drawing cards while you're still like time warping. Because that's also like the tricky part with those decks is that you need like Howling Minds, and then it's like hit or miss because you draw 2 cards. I didn't draw another time warp. I can't do anything.
Right.
You can like time warp and play concentrate or whatever. Draw
right.
card.
Right.
I think like also, if you're looking to cast,
that was a weird card for me to name.
Concentrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Harmonize or something.
Okay. Divination.
Yeah. But like, I definitely think that in Modern being a format that is pretty heavily, it's got a lot of hand disruption. So if you're going down, you're playing your card that's your accelerant effectively in your fires, and also trying to have heavy threats that you're not going to be playing early. Chances are your opponents probably looked at your hand, either taken your fires, so now you just have a bunch of clunky 4-drops, or they've taken your sweetest threat, so you like play fires and then just like cast one thing, and now you have like kind of just jank.
Yeah.
So it feels like that. Just that alone, the fact that like Thoughtseize exists and it doesn't exist in Standard is the difference.
And this is a lot of people's complaints with the Agent of Treachery ban, though. Your point on like the fact that blue-green ramp decks would just still play it if they didn't get rid of it. Like it was a card that was in more decks and therefore was problematic. But Winota and Luca are the 2 cards that I think I'm more interested in as just cards that are. And one was just Agent of Treachery is the best thing I think she can cheat into play right now, but that could change. Like at any day, they could print like a Teza that like destroys all creatures your opponent controls and put them in the play under your control.
Wizards knows what's going to be in Standard with Winota, so they're not worried as of now.
Correct.
And humans being like very high CMC, very high impact is something that we don't see very.
Correct. But it happens, and there are some in Modern, though when we looked it up, it wasn't a very, very deep list. Though Agent of Treachery might just be good enough.
Modern, right? Like 15 years or whatever is in Modern. Agent of Treachery was the best thing we could come up with in Modern, pretty much. So, like, what's the likelihood that in Standard there's going to be something better?
Right. Well, but like a 10 drop, like a big expensive human, like that could happen. The thing with humans is that they can be expensive, right? They're humans.
Have to speculate.
And we just know that in the next year and a half that it won't happen.
They should print a card called Superhuman. It'd be really good.
I guess on the other end, in Historic, Winota wasn't playing Agents of Treacheries. Like I guess that's kind of the other side of it, right? Like the deck was already cutting that card and was really good. Just from the value dig engine of getting kind of again 5-drops or bigger cost spells into play. I think that's what's more likely in Modern.
I think that's the play pattern they want, though. They want you to have a mix of non-humans and humans to make the card work, and they want you to just be kind of like generating value. I don't think they want you to be like cheating stuff into play like way ahead of curve. I think they want you to just be generating value with it. And maybe it's still too good and it ends up getting banned in Historic and or Standard, but like I think that the Agent of Treachery thing was like not necessarily their intent with the card, would be my guess.
Angrath's Marauders is the human they're playing. If a source you control will deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage. That's a very good effect because it comes into play before damage, right? That's how Winota works. And
it comes in attack as well, so you'll get the 8 damage off of it.
And then it's playing Haktos is another big human that's like resilient. So yeah, I think I don't know. I think like Winota has a chance in Modern to see pretty decent play regardless of Agent of Treachery. And then I think Luca does as well. I mean, I think Luca already is. So, yeah, I think all the cards, anytime a card is banned in Standard or Historic, it's like really interesting to see, or even just to talk about like, what can this do with Modern? And does it have a chance? And it doesn't always, right? Thopter kind of has never really seen significant play in Modern as much as I wish it did because that card is sweet.
I love that card.
I mentioned Energy. Energy just was never a deck that kind of made itself known in Modern. And part of that is I think it's just better ways to cheat Emrakul into play.
There isn't like
I think, by the way, just
I guess Field of Dead was the card that got banned. Never mind, there is a Field of Dead deck.
Yeah,
I think also on the subject really quickly of just like, and I know we got to wrap it up here, but just like sort of the point that when we were talking about companions and did we know they were going to be good or not? to varying degrees, right? Like, because some things become ubiquitous, some things don't. So the initial printing of Planeswalkers back in like 2007, none of those initial Planeswalkers are busted. It took a little while for those cards to get busted. I would say vehicles by and large never really got busted in good formats, whereas like equipment did get busted pretty fast. So when you try something new out, it's not always a perfect science of how you're going to make it work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It's just very rarely does it happen like it happened with Companions, where like they're just like, yeah, we didn't really anticipate just quite how insane this was going to be.
What happened with equipments, actually?
Yeah, no, I kind of disagree with you.
And they're like, whoops, skull clamp.
Like Planeswalkers.
And GTA, yeah, I guess it's true. Yeah,
equipment's like that happened immediately. Planeswalkers, the first one saw play, but pretty quickly. Like Jace is 2 years after they were premiered, and decimated the format. Equipment
kind of was the vehicle mistake, where they're like, "Oops, there was a vehicle that was too pushed,"
and like, we haven't had a playable one since.
All vehicles, but
and then the other one, which because this was a conversation we had a ton last year, because War of the Spark introduced the textless Planeswalker, like the static ability Planeswalker,
right.
And that they also did this, right? Like there are 5 static ability Planeswalkers that have seen significant play in Eternal formats.
Yeah, right.
At least, and that's me just thinking off the top of my head. Between
one of them got banned.
One of them got banned. One of them should get banned, and hopefully does.
It didn't get banned, but it got its best friend banned.
Yeah. It got a card. One got a card banned. One is Teferi, and everyone wants to be banned out of every format.
Also, Narset.
Narset is no fun for anyone. Ugin is seeing play. It's not problematic. It's just very good. Yeah, no, I think like static ability Planeswalkers did it again, right? Like every time there's a new mechanic or like a new card type. Yeah. And not every time. Like a great example is Sagas didn't do it, right? Sagas are fine and they're great and everyone loves them.
Yeah. I just
for now.
It would be nice if we hadn't had so many in sequence all in the course of a couple of years that were so savage. But it's all right. I would still rather they push Magic than not push it, because we talked about that. Ixalan, those sets, the boring ones, they're really, really, really freaking boring.
Yeah, I would like cards that are good. Yeah. I just
also, if anyone was wondering at home, Concentrate is legally modern. I looked it up.
I thought so. It was 8th edition, right?
8th edition. It's got.
Yeah, I thought so. If you're like, I trusted you on that, Michael. I shouldn't have. I should have trusted my gut.
If you're ever like, there's no way this card is legally modern, it's in 8th or 9th edition, like every time.
Always. Yeah, 100%.
I want to do a historic episode really bad. We could. There's been so much stuff to talk about that there hasn't been a moment to delve deep into historic. It's cool. I know. Well, maybe the Winota deck broke. Like I think with Winota decks being good, every one of the companions saw significant constructed play in some variety or like success in some way, because it played with Yumari, which before that point was like kind of the bad one.
So maybe next week we'll do.
What?
It's like playable in every format now.
Yeah. No, now it's a different world. Just like Winota in Historic snuck it in as everyone was problematic at least once.
So maybe next week we do a Historic episode, because the week after that we've got a preview card, and it's exciting. And I can't wait to talk to you guys about it.
It's really cool. I'm excited.
It's one of my favorites.
Oh, also, June 6th, I will be one of the participants in the Command Fest that Channel Fireball is doing on Channel Fireball's Twitch channel. I'm playing at 11:45, so 11:45 Pacific time, June 6th. I will be probably playing my Kess deck. I did a deck tech on our channel. You can go check out the Commander deck tech that I did. That was cool and new. Let us know if you like that kind of stuff. And I'll be jamming games, so you can watch me on the Channel Fireball Twitch stream, which will be really cool. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. I'm at Kess Wiley. Ben is at Ben Bateman Media. Michael is Dudard, which I can never spell correctly.
At DUDARDD.
Cool. There's 2 D's. I always forget where the second D is, and there's 3 different places it can be.
There's 3. There's 4 D's.
There's 4 D's. There's a second total. D with it. There's a double D moment, and I just never remember where the double D is.
It's at the end.
It's at the end. Oh, the puppy's
coming. I think there's a puppy sighting.
Yes, Peanut.
This is Peanut.
Your puppy's name is Peanut?
That's so cute. I can't handle it.
That's so cute.
Taking a second picture for future.
That's adorable.
Oh, man. I'm so excited to stand dramatically holding Peanut and looking off in the distance like all of the other dog photos that I've taken.
You guys are both going to have dog photos. I guess I have to go find a dog that I can hold for my magic photo.
Yeah, yep, that's true. We all need dog holding magic photos. Jen, if you can work on getting Michael a dog holding magic photo, that's Jen, Michael's wife. Everyone say hi.
Hi, Jen.
So make sure to follow us on Twitter. Make sure to follow Michael for more awesome dog photos. Also, make sure to follow Jen on Twitter. His wife, who's actually going to be posting the dog photos.
Genosaurus.
Jen, can you shout out your Twitter handle?
Jen Jakes, JACQUES.
I was wrong. I was calling out the Instagram. That was the one.
Instagram's probably a more likely dog photo location, though. So,
that's strong. Strong point.
Speaking of Instagram, I'm also Kess Wiley there. Ben is also Ben Bateman Media. Michael doesn't have one, but his dog may in the future. And make sure to just check out the channel every week. Make sure to subscribe. We're just trying to do more content. Everything from me just doing direct-to-camera stuff to deck text to Ben recording stuff. We have hot takes every Tuesday that get posted to our Patreon early. And make sure to check out our Patreon. That's how we pay Marshall, who did all the editing, all this card stuff here that has been near me, showing you what we're talking about. Marshall did all that. And so that really helps. Patreon helps us accomplish that, all the technology that we've been able to pull together to be able to do this still during the quarantine moment. So definitely check that out. And yeah. All right.
Big time salute. Pinkies up. House of Modern. Love you guys. See you soon.
Thank you so much.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.